All right, what's going on, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of the New Challenger Approaching podcast. I'm your host, McGrill HD, and with me today I have.
Thy Pirate King. Hey, how's it going, man? I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Glad to have you here. So, the this podcast is going to be about fighting games and our new server, New Challenger Approaching. We will be linked in the description. And our goal is to get new players into the fighting game community. And we also want to encourage more people to just pick up fighting games, even if it's not at a competitive level. We just want to grow the community and have more fun with more people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's great that what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. A big thing that we actually have going on is our NCA Monthly. It's going to be the first monthly that we're hosting. And we're going to be playing Fantasy Strike. Everyone in the server has picked up a game. We voted for it. And we are spending a month to try and learn the game. And we're going to be playing that on the 14th of next month. And I heard that there was a big Fantasy Strike tournament this past weekend that you actually commentated. Would you like to give us some info on that?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. It was the Quarantined Rapport 3 charity tournament. It was a massive event with tons of games. I happened to be on the commentary for the Fantasy Strike one. What a tournament it was, actually. Just to give a few highlights, one of the best players in Fantasy Strike, probably one of the top 3 players in Fantasy Strike, actually lost before even getting to top 8, and then lost in the losers bracket in the top 8 to a player known as Janet, who has kind of been, I mean, she's a fantastic player, don't get me wrong, but no one expected her to do this good, and it's absolutely amazing to see how much she's grown since the beginning of Fantasy Strike. So massive big tournament. We raised over $5,000 for charity, which was really massive. I always love the Quarantine Report tournaments. This was the 3rd one, and I can't wait to do the next one if they'll have me.
Yeah, that's very impressive from Janet, placing 3rd. I tuned into a little bit of the tournament and got to actually watch one of her victories in top 8. It was very impressive to watch how she played, especially with Lum. Her Lum was very good.
Yeah, no, her Lum, I generally say that it's either Janet's Lum or Organis's Lum who has the best Lum in the game. And I think we kind of got to see some really good highlights of Janet's Lum. She sort of came back from some unwinnable situations, it looked like, many times. And she also beat another great player named Rogue Yoshi. So Janet was just on fire during this tournament. Absolutely amazing to watch. If anyone hasn't watched that, just go watch all of Janet's games. They're all in the top 8, so they're amazing.
And it was a charity tournament, correct?
Yeah, no, it was a charity tournament. Yeah, so it was you could donate to charity. Again, we raised over $5,000. I have the actual number. $5,412 was raised for Direct Relief, which is a charity that's sort of doing good work for COVID-19 relief. Really big supporter there. This is the 3rd one where we've had the charity for Direct Relief. So I'm really happy that I could be part of it. I think charity is one of the best things about human society.
Yeah, that's absolutely awesome to hear. And that it was going to a great cause makes it even better. So, for the first topic we want to get into is a new game. It's going to bring a lot of hype to the fighting game community, and that's going to be Guilty Gear Strive. Did you get to participate in the beta at all?
No, unfortunately, I didn't. I actually don't have myself a PS4 or a PS5. Well, I don't think anyone has a PS5, unfortunately. But now I'm a PC player, so I'm going to have to wait until April. But I have been watching a lot of videos, some streams, some VODs. It's looking really good.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to have a PS4. Games that I play other than fighting games are MLB The Show, and that is a PlayStation specific game. So I already owned a PlayStation for that, so I got kind of lucky, and I got to hop into the Strive beta, and it plays incredible. It is so fun. The rollback works tremendously. I actually spent most of my time playing on the Japanese server, and I very rarely had any connection issues. I tried out most of the servers. The only one I really had connection issues with was Europe for some reason, but all the other servers was very good. And the gameplay mechanic plays completely differently than any of the other Guilty Gears, at least from what I've heard. Do you have any knowledge on other Guilty Gears?
I have a bit of knowledge. I played a little bit of XRD, and I do run tournaments for Plus R, but this will be my first Guilty Gear that I'm really going to dive really head first into. But yeah, no, it looks a lot different. I've been reading up on it, I've been watching videos, and it seems like even the Roman cancels are slightly different. Like we have 4 of them now. Some of the way that the movement is working is there. Like everything about this game, they sort of built it from the ground up. Like you mentioned, they also added the rollback netcode, which I believe is the first Guilty Gear that's being supported by the actual company that's doing rollback. I know that Plus R has it, but if I'm correct, I think this is the first one that the company's doing it for, at least the first major Japanese company that's doing it. And oh man, I'm excited. I think that good online net play is one of the main things that you need for a fighting game. You know, if you're constantly going online, if you're constantly playing online, you're just getting frustrated because of the lag. You're not going to have a good time. You know, this is one of the I play a lot of Fantasy Strike, which has rollback netcode as well, and I play that game all the time, and I love it online because I almost never lag. And I went to go play Smash Brothers Ultimate, and I literally turned off my Switch because I was lagging so much. I just couldn't handle it. I was like, this is no lag. I'm gonna go back to rollback netcode games.
Yeah, especially nowadays, you know, everyone still having to be home. That's a huge deal. Like, if I bet if there were more locals, we might not have seen as much of a ramp up on games implementing rollback netcode. But with it, I mean, Slippy for Super Smash Bros. Melee, someone developed rollback netcode for that game, and then it seems after that, everyone just kind of hopped on board because the Smash community latched onto it because Ultimate and Smash 4, their netcode is just terrible. You cannot play a game on there without lagging.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's even worse if you play against someone on Wi-Fi on Smash Ultimate or 4.
Mhm.
I played online for that game just because I do like Smash, but it is just it's terrible. And I played against friends before who live. I have played against people in Smash Ultimate who live in the same state as me, like in the same state of the United States of America. So like I played people who live in the same state, and we only live maybe 4 hours apart, and we still lag, and we both have good internet. And it's just how is this even possible? But then rollback netcode, I think, is definitely the future of fighting games, and it really makes me happy that Arc Systems is actually pushing rollback netcode into their big installment of Guilty Gear Strive because we really need the big companies to actually push rollback netcode for this to become, a standard.
Absolutely. The indie developers pushing it might put some pressure on the bigger developers, but until the bigger developers implement it, then, they're kind of just going off of we did this before, it worked. We can sell the game like this. We don't have to put any more effort in. So let's just sell it this way. And I'm glad Arc System's going above and beyond for their community and the player base of Guilty Gear. I think it's going to bring a lot more players in, to be honest with you.
Oh, 100%. It's gonna bring me in, right? I mean, that's you got one. You sold one copy, Arc Systems. You sold one copy. I saw rollback netcode, and I said, "Oh, it's rollback. Okay, I'll give Guilty Gear a try. Let's go. Let's see how good your rollback is, right?" And then apparently, from what I've seen, it's some of the best in the business. Like it's doing really good rollback. Very little lag, if any, from what I've seen online. So it's absolutely great. I love rollback netcode. Ever since I got into Fantasy Strike, I am a huge advocate of rollback. So I'm really happy that Strive is going for the rollback netcode because, especially Strive, right? I mean, it's a combo based game. It's very fast paced, and when you're delayed based, that's just not very good for very high paced fast games, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to land your combos in Guilty Gear. Uh, Strive is a little less combo oriented than other games like Plus R, because it's slower paced. It seems like, but you definitely do have to land your combos because if you just get straight hits, you're not gonna do that much damage, and more than likely you're gonna end up getting killed because there is chip damage. There are some characters that do a lot of damage very quickly, like May. She can just throw her dolphin at you, and then all that chip damage, you will get burnt down really, really fast. So you have to be able to land combos, and hitting those inputs is really hard on delay-based netcode. But with the rollback, it makes it so much easier. So much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're also forgetting to mention, defense, right? Delay base makes defense very hard too, right? It's harder to defend sometimes when you're lagging all the time or when things are slowed down. So it's actually kind of nice to have that so that you can react to things a little bit better, right? Again, it's not perfect. I don't want to say that rollback is perfect. There are negatives to it, right? That delay based doesn't have, but the positives are just so vast and so superior to delay based. But speaking of the combos, you mentioned the combos in Guilty Gear, they're a little bit different, right? You want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so from what I noticed, I don't know the technical side of it. I just know from getting my hands on the game and playing with a few different characters. When I play Kai on plus R, I can combo so many things and it's like very quick. I feel like in Strive, it's more decision based. You practice your combos in training mode, you get a muscle memory for them, and then you know which situations you can use those combos in. So like there's very specific situations for very specific combos. And then you obviously have your bread and butters that you can use at any time. But you have to know when you're using the combo that it will land or you're going to get punished. Because it is a very, very punishing game, especially with their counter hit mechanic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this game is personally I love it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it as well. I love the fact that they've kind of taken Guilty Gear and slowed it down a bit. It's still, hyper fast, you're still constantly moving around. There's still lots of footsies, but I like that they said, let's not make it just, 50 combo, right? 50 hit combos. Let's actually, increase the damage a little bit, slow things down, and give players a chance to say, okay, I need to actually, like you were saying, I need to know when to use this combo, right? Because if I mess up, I'm going to get punished hard by my opponent, right? And I love stuff like that. I love it when it's very sort of, you have high risk, high reward. You have, low risk, like not as much reward, right? I like the fact that you actually have to sort of get into your opponent's head and say, oh, I think you're going to press this button, so I'm going to do this button, which will lead into this combo if it hits. But if you don't press that button, well, I might get punished a little bit, right? But then you also have, safer moves where you can kind of poke them a little bit, right? You can kind of just poke in a little bit, get some range. For example, with Faust, right? Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Faust. I think it's Faust.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, it's Faust.
Faust getting in there with his scalpel, right? He has that long range. He can kind of poke you with it. And if he does get you, he can kind of pull you back and maybe start a little bit of a combo here. So I really like that aspect of fighting games, getting into your opponent's head, slowing things down a little bit, giving people a chance to breathe. And, I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I definitely do like the way it plays. And another thing is I'm also new to the Guilty Gear franchise, but I did like how every single character was different and you had to learn unique things about each character. And all of them have their pros and their cons, but having a system like that where each character is very unique allows for so much more diversity, especially among players, because you have a soul player who likes to play this like super rushdown style, but then you can also have a soul player who plays more defensive and hits his combos off of punishing people. And then you have another soul who mixes the two. And I think it's going to provide the community with a lot of different ways that you can approach attacking people and different ways to learn how to do it, because you'll have players like Justin Wong or any of the other top players. All of them will play the character a different way. So I think that's going to be a good thing for the fighting community, because not everyone wants to play rushdown. Not everyone wants to play defensive. Some people want to play really different. And I think this game allows people to just be different.
Yeah, no, I think I completely agree with you. I think it gives, players a lot of options. You have lots of different things you can do with each character. And I like that you mentioned, all the characters feel very unique. I think that's kind of an important part with a fighting game, right? You don't want your characters to all feel samey. You want them to all feel unique, have their special abilities. I think I heard one YouTuber or Twitch streamer, I think it was a YouTuber, he's probably both, but he mentioned something that every character in Guilty Gear breaks the game in their own special way, which I thought was very interesting. They kind of have some mechanic that breaks how the game is meant to be played, right? So I don't remember the name of the character, but there's a character in the game that doesn't have any dashes. They can't dash at all, right? Which is really interesting because that's kind of part of a mechanic of the game, is being able to dash, but this character cannot dash. So it kind of changes the way you have to think about that character, it changes the way you have to think about playing both as that character and against that character.
Absolutely. And like you said, there are some characters that don't dash. There are some characters that have two air dashes. There are some characters that have command grabs. Some of them don't. Like, I did genuinely love the fact that there was so much to learn, even though it was just a beta that we only got to play for a weekend. Like, there was so much you could just dive into, and with good online, that you could like practice with other people. You didn't just have to practice against a training dummy. I feel like I learned so much about this game in the like 3 days I got to play it than I've learned about other fighting games within like my first month or 2 months of playing them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, I know we're probably going to touch on it a lot, but it's just such an important factor is having good online play, right? It's much better when you can actually play against opponents, like you said, and practice against people like that. It's very good to not have to worry about lagging as much, right? And I love that. That's when I picked up Fantasy Strike, right? One of the ways I learned that game was playing against opponents. And you know what was great about that? I didn't lag, right? I actually got to play and not experience frustration through lag. Don't get me wrong, of course, like every game is going to sometimes lag. Don't think this is a perfect solution, but it is better than what we've had, for say Street Fighter, right? Or Mortal Kombat, where it's all delay based, And I'm not even saying that it's terrible all the time, but it has a higher likelihood of being terrible. So it's much nicer in this game that you can actually just hop into a game and actually play against some opponents and get some good practice in, or just friends, right? You play against your friends and, practice with your friends and not have to worry about lagging all over the place, which is absolutely fantastic.
Now, not everything was great about the beta. There were a lot of server issues, especially with the couldn't find R code or whatever it was. It was something with the R code where you basically couldn't connect to the servers. And right off of the download, the first day, I couldn't access it until 6 a.m. the next morning. It released at 10 p.m. Pacific time because the servers were down. And the servers were down all day prior to that, up until about 2 hours before the launch of the beta. So that is one thing that hopefully will be fixed by launch. And the lobbies are not that user friendly either. If those things can be fixed before launch, I genuinely think this game will have such an impact with it. We've talked about it so much, but the rollback, the unique characters, the new way Guilty Gear is being played, and how they're actually trying to get more beginners and new people into the fighting game scene. I think it'll have such an impact, and the numbers will go up a huge amount, just not even just for people playing Guilty Gear, but for people joining the fighting game community in general.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you touched on something important there, right? Is that it is important to look at some of the negatives too, right? Because something that I've learned is that I generally criticize the things I love the most, right? So the things I really love and that I want to do well, I criticize the most, right? Because I want them to actually do well. This is why, for example, I'm actually pretty vocal in the Fantasy Strike community, at least with some of my friends and stuff, where I very vocal about what I think should be changed because I love the game so much. And I'm going to do the same thing about Guilty Gear. Like you said, yeah, the lobby system, from what I've seen, is not the best, right? It's kind of brutal. I think someone said that the lobbies themselves might be delay based. So the lobbies themselves might be delay based, but the actual game itself is rollback, which is kind of weird, right? Like, why not just make it all rollback? And now, to be fair, I wouldn't necessarily be against the lobbies being delay based as long as the gameplay is rollback. Like, that's the gameplay is what's important. But it would be nice if the lobbies, they could update it to make it a little bit more mainstream, more visually appealing. Make it better, right? Just make the lobbies better. Also, you mentioned the servers where it was having some difficulties connecting to some of the servers, which always is kind of, that's rough. But I did hear that Arc Systems extended the open beta, right, because of the server issues. So that's always nice to see that a developer recognizes. They say, oh, we have a problem. You know what? Like, we're not going to punish you for our mistake. We're actually going to, give you guys a bit of extra time to play. So I think that was a really nice thing that Arc Systems did for the community.
Yeah, definitely. Getting that extra day of playtime was very nice. I got to dive into a few more characters and just have a little bit more fun with my friends before it went away for, a month and a half or however long it's going to be. I believe it's a month and a half.
Yeah, it comes out in April 9th, I believe, and I think the deluxe edition, you can play it on April 6th, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, that sounds right.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm super stoked for this game. I'm very envious of you for being able to play it when I couldn't. I actually maybe I should have just gone to Best Buy or something and bought myself a PS4. I think those are still available, right? I know PS5 I can't get anywhere.
Yeah.
I did, I did debate. I was like, do I want to buy like a PS4 to play? I was like, you know what? No, I'm just gonna be patient. I'll just watch some YouTube for now. I get it on my PC when it comes out. Actually, another negative. Since we have been talking so highly, I want to point this out because this is something that I really think that Arc Systems should change as soon as possible. They're not offering crossplay between PC and the PlayStation, which is a big negative for me because there's no reason why they shouldn't. I think that if you have the ability to do crossplay, you definitely should. And I think they really should do crossplay for these two platforms because that just brings more players to your game, right? It brings more of a community. It lets tournaments, especially online tournaments, right? Because with a rollback game, you can definitely have online tournaments. And if you split up the communities, it's going to make it a lot rougher for these kinds of tournaments, for these online events, and just for friends, right? Say I have a friend who has a PS4, or I meet someone who has a PS4 at a convention or something, and they don't have a PC. I don't get to play Guilty Gear with them now because I don't have a PS4. Maybe I'll get a PS5 or PS4 eventually, but I don't have one right now, and that's really unfortunate. So I'd really like them to either on release date or sometime after release to patch in crossplay. I think that'd be a really, really big benefit to the game. It would really make the player base massive. It would make it so that you basically always find a match when you actually log in and queue for quick play or ranked or lobbies or whatever have you.
Yeah, I have seen a lot of flack towards Arc Systems for not allowing crossplay in Strive, and I think they will implement it in the future. But I've heard their assumptions for their reasoning on it is in Japan, PC gaming isn't like as high as it is in other parts of the world, so they still play mostly on PlayStations. Like the Dragon Ball FighterZ World Finals this year was on PlayStation. So once they kind of get more of a PC like community over there in Japan, then I feel like more Japanese companies will start implementing crossplay like that.
Yeah, I just hope that they're the first. I'd really like there to be crossplay. Although I can kind of see that reasoning, right? Maybe they didn't want to put in the resources for it because, yeah, to be fair, Arc Systems is a Japanese company, right? And although it's also for Americans, generally when you make a game that's a Japanese company, it's more for Japan, right? That just is how it works, right? It's made for Japan, not for America. America just happens to get it as well. So I can kind of understand that. However, they should still do it. They should still give us crossplay.
Hopefully we'll get that in the future because I don't want to have to buy 2 copies of the game.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's right. I will say one good thing. They are doing crossplay with PS4 and PS5, and apparently if you have it for PS4, so if you buy it for PS4, and then if you get a PS5, it'll automatically upgrade to the PS5 version, as far as I'm aware. I was reading an article about that. So that's a good thing. Maybe we'll get a Switch release too. Who knows?
Yeah, that would be very nice.
You think
take it on the go?
Yeah. Honestly, that would be pretty sick. That's a bit of a stretch though. I don't know if we'll get Guilty Gear on the Switch, but it'd be cool though.
It would be very cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I feel like we've talked enough about Guilty Gear, at least for the time being. Let's move on to some other things that have happened in the fighting games community as of recently. Yesterday, there was a big Street Fighter V update. And I was very excited for this because Dan was coming out. The meme character of Street Fighter, he's hilarious to watch. His moves are not that great, and he's not really a great character, but he's fun to play, and he's fun to watch. They also came out with a new mechanic called V-Shift. I don't know if you know much about it. You've told me you don't play very much Street Fighter, but it's a new defensive mechanic. You input it with medium kick and hard punch at the same time, and it basically allows you to do it like instant dash back. And if you time it perfectly with your opponent's attack, you can punish their attack.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that actually sounds pretty cool. Like I did read up a little bit on it from a link that you sent me, and yeah, V-Shift. I'm a big fan of sort of defensive gameplay. Like I do like the defensive play depending on the characters I'm picking in a fighting game. So I think adding a defensive mechanic I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing as long as it's done correctly. Like as long as it's not overpowered, right? Because sometimes too much defense can be bad, right? Because if you can just sort of
Mhm.
turtle and do, for example, with Guilt, I know that we just stopped talking about. I'm just gonna bring up another example though. With Guilty Gear Strive, one of their mechanics is that they have good defensive mechanics, right? Where you can, perfect block, you can faultless or flawless block, you can you have different ways of blocking, which is very awesome, right? But they also have a way
Mhm.
of managing that where if you're blocking too much or if you're not attacking at all, if you're just defending all the time, you'll actually just lose your meter, or you'll actually get this gauge called risk gauge, where if it fills up, the next thing that hits you is going to be a counter hit, right? Which is, I really like that system because it says, hey, you have good defensive options, but you're not allowed to just be defensive. You actually have to play the game. You actually have to fight back. And as long as V Shift does something similar and isn't overpowered and has ways of playing around, I think it'll be perfect.
I got to use it some in a couple matches last night, and it doesn't seem very overpowered, but I don't play at a super high level. But I did watch a lot of gameplay yesterday, especially on Dan, because I need to learn the combos. I need to learn how he works in Street Fighter 5 because he's different to Street Fighter 4. And I was watching some gameplay with like Daigo and some of the other really good players. It did not seem to be utilized a whole lot like I thought it was going to be. It seems to be a very specific situation when you like kind of like something that happened in Strive. You predict when they're going to do it, you press the buttons, and then you can punish. Because if you press it too early, then you don't get to block their attack and they still can hit you. So you have to time it perfectly. I don't think it's going to be super overpowered. It's kind of like a parry, I guess, is what you could describe it
Yeah, it
as.
sounds very similar to a parry because it seems like, so what is it so if you do it right as they're about to hit you, it stops it and then you can punish them, right?
Yeah, so you like do the dash back and then it gives your character a like glowing eye and that indicates that okay, you can punish them. And then you have a couple frames, I don't know the exact numbers, but you have some frames to punish them with whatever attack you want to. Usually I think it would be like a DP or, like a fireball or something for me that would be easy to input, but for better players you could get a full combo off of it.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I think it does sound kind of like a parry, which I like. I like, so you basically have to reactively use it. It's not just you use it and it, gives you something crazy, right? You actually have to kind of have some skill, or maybe even have to get a read, right? Maybe you expect your opponent to press a button that's not reactable to, right? So maybe, they press like a 4-frame button or a 5-frame button where it's basically impossible to react to, or very hard to react to, at least, right? Maybe some gods can do it, right? But very hard to react
Yeah.
to. So you think that they're gonna do a really, crazy fast move. You use it, you punish them for it, and I think that's really really awesome. Games like this isn't really a fighting game, but just to give an example, games like For Honor have this kind of mechanic, right, where you can react to your opponent's attack with a parry. So you actually have to attack at the same time they attack, right? And it'll parry them, and then you can get some free damage on them, right? But if you attack and if they feint their attack, then now you get punished, right? Or they parry you. So I wonder if that's kind of something that you can do where maybe you can go for an attack, or you can intentionally whiff an attack. So maybe you're out of range and you intentionally whiff an attack, make them use their V shift, and then punish them for that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a really good mechanic. Street Fighter 5 has needed some defensive mechanics for a while. It's been a super offensive based game, so I think this adds a little bit of balance. But I don't think it's going to be super game breaking and game changing like it might have looked like in the trailer. So it's definitely good that I don't think it is, super game breaking. It's not going to make people rage quit the game because it's an overpowered mechanic. I just think it's a good defensive option that higher level players will use to their advantage, and lower level players more than likely won't even notice. Some of the games I played online, very few people even used it, and a couple people I played in the Discord server, they were having to ask me how to do it. So I think the higher you go, the more valuable of a mechanic it is. But for the lower level players, I don't think it's really going to affect you that much.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So it seems like it's a mechanic that's more intended for the professional players, for the really, really good players, for the top players. And maybe, if you are a lower player, it's something that you can learn to use over time, but it's not going to really affect what you're doing necessarily right now, which I think that's fine. I think that's kind of an interesting aspect to a game, sort of something that's, a little bit harder to do, but once you start using it, it's really effective in specific situations, right? It's not effective in every situation. It's effective in specific situations. I know that you mentioned that you were watching some pro players like Daigo with the V shift. Sorry, getting it wrong. Yeah, with the V shift, and they weren't using it that often. I think that, do you think that maybe they're not using it that often just because it's new and they haven't really practiced with it much and they haven't really gotten used to it? Because I know that a lot of times when a new mechanic or even a new character comes out, sometimes players aren't very good with it yet. Or they even say, for example, if a new character comes out, they might say, oh, that character is, really bad. But then say, 2 months later, oh, this character, this mechanic is really overpowered and really, really good, right? They figure out how to break the system, right?
Yeah, and I do think that's a very valid point. Another thing is it does use up 1 bar of your V trigger meter. So that's another reason, because V triggers in this game can be very, very powerful. You might not necessarily want to waste a bar of it on a defensive option that's only going to get you, maybe a 10% combo. So I do think that's another thing that leads into people not using it as much. Some people definitely value their V trigger more than a defensive option, especially right now with it being new, like you said.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. So it actually uses another resource. Yeah. So yeah. So that might be one of the ways that it's balanced. Then maybe they could actually even patch it, like in a future patch, if they think that people aren't using it enough. They could either make it a little bit more powerful, right? They could maybe make it use less V or less of your meter, or they could make it, give you a bigger punish, or they could make make it so that you can use it faster, or something, right? They can change it over time, right? That's the best part about, games in the modern day, right? Is that we can actually change things based off of, player feedback and what we're seeing in the actual world, right?
Yeah, that is a very good thing, is patches. And I think patches are super important to a game, but I I think some of the older games that never got patched, they provide you with some of the most like fun times, because all the glitches and stuff didn't get patched out. They couldn't just go back and, fix their mistakes. So they shipped you a game and it provides these things at a competitive level that are amazing, but it also provides these things that are like fun and you can mess around with in your spare time and just play with your buddies. I think having both of those are very important.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think sometimes the older games can be really fun for that very reason. Do we want to get into a discussion about wobbling though, which is a bit of a controversial one?
Oh God, no! I have very strong opinions on
As do
wobbling.
not ban. Don't ban wobbling. All right, I'm done. End of that discussion.
I I I don't know if it should be banned, but I definitely despise it. I despise the players who use it, but that's also because I never really took the time to learn how to counter it. So it is my fault. It's not the game's fault.
And
I must throw that out there.
I know how you know how to counter it. It's just don't get grabbed.
Well, yeah,
I'm just messing. I just wanted to bring that up as an interesting
yeah.
part, right? Because some people with like the glitches, I actually tend to, older mechanics, I think they can be very interesting and very fun. But depending on the mechanic, it can be controversial, or sometimes it can be loved, right? Some people love wobbling, right?
Hmm.
I actually think it's about 50-50 from what I've seen in the Melee community. I think some Melee players really like it and some Melee players really hate it. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm just like, whatever. Like it's what, like, just don't get grabbed. I know that's a terrible. I'm
Hmm.
sure the Melee community is probably either hating me right now or loving me right now, but I don't play Melee, so it doesn't matter. Uh, but yeah, no, it's interesting. And then nowadays, though, that kind of stuff would never happen, right? If wobbling was a thing in Ultimate, for example, I can almost guarantee it'd be patched out, right? But then again, Bayonetta
Hmm.
existed, so um,
Yeah. And Leroy existed in Tekken. Like, I mean,
oh, Leroy. Oh, man. I don't even play Tekken, and I felt the pain of Tekken players. Like I felt it. I felt it from the ether, and I don't even play the game. And yeah, Leroy, Bayonetta, Meta Knight. Man, fighting game companies need to get better at patching. That's next podcast. Why fighting game companies are bad at patching?
Yeah, definitely. Because like in Brawl Meta Knight, in my opinion, he was the only viable character. Just because he had so many more options compared to everybody else, and he could actually move. Like it felt like all the other characters in Brawl were just stuck in place. And I could
Yeah, Meta
move.
Knight was crazy. I didn't really follow much of the Brawl scene, but from what I've heard and from just the statistics I've seen on the wikis, yeah, he was just everywhere. I think Marth, was it Marth or Falco? There was another character in Brawl that did sometimes see play, like at top level tournaments. They never won, or they sometimes won. I think it was Marth. Was it Marth? I don't remember. It's been a while. Brawl's an old game. Man, I am old. Man, that game's been out for a while, making me feel old over here. Ugh, terrible.
Yeah, Melee released, what was it, 2 years after I was born. So knowing that that game is starting to get really old makes me feel old, and I'm only 21, but it makes me feel old.
Oh, now I'm 23, so oh man, you're stop making me feel old. I grew up on Melee. Like I played that game as a kid, like on my GameCube, and then I got a Wii, and then I played Brawl. And I didn't get a Wii U though, and then I got a Switch and played Ultimate. And I look back on that, I'm like, oh yeah, I was playing Melee and Brawl, when I was in elementary school. Man, I'm old.
Those were the days. Playing on the GameCube, you'd play Melee and then you'd play Double Dash with your friends and just having a good old time, drink some apple juice and eat a PB&J after school when you're done with your homework. Like
Yeah, no,
those were the days.
absolutely. Remember when we actually had to invite our friends over to play video games with them?
Yeah, no internet.
Oh man, those yeah, no, that was good days. Sadly, I never really got competitive in fighting games during that time, but good memories though, good memories. Aside from the past though, yeah, V Shift, very cool mechanic for Street Fighter 5. I also find it very funny that everything for Street Fighter, every time they add something new, it's always a V in front of it because 5, which is interesting. I'll just leave it at that. I don't know if it's a little cheesy. That's what I'm trying to say.
I wonder what they're gonna do for the next game.
Six shift.
Six
Yeah, like
shift.
a car, like six shift car. I don't know. I'm not a car person. Is that a thing? Six shifts for cars? I know that there's stick shift. Stick shift. It'll be like that. It's like it'll be great.
So, moving on to the last topic I want to talk about today. Since we've talked so much about Strive, I know we were trying to get away from it, but since it's a new game coming out, it does have a lot of hype from the fighting game community, and people are trying to get new players to join us, come to the dark side and play fighting games. Do you have any tips for new players getting into a new game or getting into fighting games in general? What's the best way for them to go about learning it, and how should they apply it based on the knowledge that they have of games?
Oh man, yeah, it's a very hard question because I think that sometimes people will just say, just train, 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 get good, right? And I think that
Mhm.
I think there's a lot more to it. I think what I would say is yes, practice, yes, do these things, but make sure you're having fun. I think if you're having fun, that's a big part. And, I would suggest going in with a friend. I think that's a good way to really practice off of a fighting game. Find a friend who also is interested in the game. And this goes for any game, right? And play with a friend, because if they're new to the game and you're new to the game, you're going to be on kind of an even playing field, right? But a big tip, I think watching top tier players playing and watching guides is a really, really big tip I would give. Um, I know that's kind of maybe what a lot of people would say, but I think people really underestimate how much better you can get by watching people who are better than you. Like I'm a TO, like I commentate and I TO for tournaments, and I've had people like comment on my YouTube videos for my tournaments, and I've chatted with people saying, that they've learned so much from watching the tournaments, right? From watching both my analysis of their gameplay and like sort of being able to tell the audience what's going on and tell the audience what these characters are doing and why what they're doing is working or isn't working. Not only that helps a new player learn, just watching the person play themselves, right? Watching that player play. So sort of learn how the base game mechanics work so that you understand what the commentator is saying, right? And then watch some high level play and then imitate that, right? If you see a high level player doing something consistently, like if they're poking in a specific way, imitate that poking, right? You don't even necessarily need to know why that's good, but just imitating it can help you learn why it's good, right? Because if you imitate something that's good, right, it's going to show up in your gameplay as being good, right? And then when it doesn't work, you can adjust, right? But you for example, if you have a really good poke move, right? If you have say a 4-day or I guess a 6A, right? A 6A, a 4-day. And if you do that, and if that's your safe move, maybe as a new player, you don't know that. But if you watch a top level player and they're just constantly poking with that move, right? Maybe you should do that, right? Maybe you should take that and actually do that. I actually learned this in Fantasy Strike. I was watching the Rook Hugger, Shabs. We talked about him earlier, one of the best players in the game. We're actually friends too. He's a really, really cool guy, super nice guy. He's really helpful in the community too. He always helps out. And I was watching him play in some of my tournaments, and something he would do is he would neutral jump AA as Valerie, and he would also jump into the opponent and do an air super, like right in his opponent's face, or sometimes just randomly. And I asked him, and like it seemed very strange to me, right? But I started kind of doing it in my own gameplay, and I was like, oh, this is really good. Like I see, and I actually figured out why it was so good. Because it started working in my gameplay in interesting ways, and I also chatted to him about it, and I asked him like, why is this working the way it is? Like why do you do this? And he explained it to me, and it was very, very enlightening. So yeah, that would be my big tip. Watch high level play, watch tournaments, and if you get a chance to talk to players who are better than you and take their advice. Like even if you don't necessarily understand it, because sometimes I have disagreed with top players and then it turned out I was wrong. So take the advice of top players, watch tournaments, watch high level play, and that'll really help you improve. This is actually a psychological thing too, with sports. If you play a sport and if you watch better players play that sport, it actually will help you get better. Like this is actually a psychological thing. Like when you are watching someone who's better than you play, or even when you're just thinking about practicing, it actually can improve your skill. It's really interesting. So that'd be my big tip. Sorry, I took a bit of time there.
No, you're all good. Mine was actually going to be kind of on a similar path, but a thing I've noticed has helped me is in the past like 2 weeks, for every new game I pick up, I go on Google, I find one combo, I write it down on a notepad, I go practice it for say 30 minutes until I've got the muscle memory of that combo down, and then I just go into games online and try to figure out what works, how I can get to that combo against another person, what doesn't work, and I try to take notes on it. And after, say 30 minutes of playing, I'll go look over my notes and be like, okay, this doesn't work. I need to take this into training mode, figure out why. And you can learn so much just from playing against other people. You don't have to do it all in training mode. You don't have to do it all by yourself. But I think having a notepad where you can write down stuff, just key points. You don't have to remember everything. Just say you're playing like Dragon Ball Fighters and someone super dashes into you and you're trying to punish it with your down heavy and you press it a couple frames too early and you get hit. Then put down your notes, practice super dash punish timing or something like that. I think having notes is a huge thing. It's just kind of like in class. Writing notes down tends to help people remember things better. And the more you remember it, the more you'll be able to apply it to your game and apply it in the future. And all that stuff will translate as well. If you were a good note taker in school, then I think that it will be a very good tool for you. But if you weren't, you might have to learn. It'll take time. But having the notes there and having it written down will help you in the long run.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting point. I actually might have to take that tip myself. I've never thought about like taking notes like on my actual fighting game play, but yeah, that's actually a good point. I know that a lot of players, this is kind of similar to what you were saying with taking notes. Players, or I would also suggest watching your own gameplay, right? So if you're playing a game, if you have the ability to record it, a lot of fighting games nowadays actually have a theater mode. So that's really nice. So you can just watch it within the game, so you don't even need OBS or anything. But if you can, watch your own gameplay, right? And when you watch your own gameplay, take notes, like you were saying, have a piece of paper or have your iPad out or have a notepad open or anything like that, and just take some notes, right? Take some notes. See what you did wrong, and when you notice something you did wrong, yeah, take that note, because it has been proven that when you write things down, you're more likely to remember them. Like, this is this is actually a thing. You can look it up. So yeah, that's actually a very interesting point. I never thought about taking notes, and I think that'd be a really good idea. I mean, I'm sure coaches do that, right? So like, if you have a coach, they probably take notes on your gameplay and then they talk about it with you, right? So yeah, so if you take notes, that would also probably be a good thing, right? That'd probably help you out.
Yeah, like I said, I just recently started doing it, and it's actually done wonders for me gameplay wise. It helps me. It's easier for me to actually learn combos that way, because usually for me, I have to like turn and look at my other screen and then be like, okay, I have to play the video, write or look at one move, and then play the video again and figure out what the next move is. Here I can write it down, have it all set up for me, and just be like, okay, I gotta do this, this, and this. And it makes it easier for me to separate combos into like, basically, I would consider it like meals. So you got a 5 course meal as the combo. You can separate it into your appetizer, your entree, your dessert. You can set it up that way. And all right, I'm gonna figure out this part of the combo. Then I'm gonna figure out this part, and then this part, and then I'm gonna try to combine them all together.
Yeah, no, I like that mentality. Yeah, sort of putting them into sort of bite-sized chunks, right? Instead of taking it full on where you're probably never going to get it, separate it into things and write those things down so that you can quickly look at it and quickly put that to memory. And again, like you said, writing things down will help you remember them also. So, and it will help reinforce it, which I think is really, really interesting. I guess one more thing I wanted to say with like the learning the thing to play, watching your own gameplay. I always say this as well, and I know this may be like another tip, but we're kind of on the helping people right now. Enter tournaments if you can. Maybe I'm plugging myself. I know I'm a TO, and I know I want players to enter my tournaments and enter tournaments in general, but just enter whether it's my tournaments, whether it's your tournaments, whether it's anyone's tournaments, enter tournaments and play in those tournaments. And the reason I say that is because the interesting thing about gameplay is that, so for example, if you play in a casual match, right? Like just a non-ranked match in any game, whether it be a fighting game or otherwise, players play differently in those situations because there's no stakes, right? So although people will play to win, they're not really playing as hard as they might play, right? Normally. If you play in a ranked match in any game, players are going to play a little bit harder, right? Because there is some stakes, right? They want to rank up, they want to get to gold or platinum or diamond or grandmaster or what have you, right? But tournament settings that's a different ball game because everyone wants to win a tournament, right? If you win a tournament, that's like a huge achievement, right? Because everyone's playing their best, or at least in general, they're playing their best, especially if it's a prize tournament. If the tournament you're entering has a prize pool, everyone's playing their best because everyone wants to win money, right? So I would definitely suggest entering tournaments because that's where you're going to actually play against people who are trying their best. They're not going to go easy on you. You don't have to worry about that. They're gonna give it all guns blazing. It is going to be a challenge, and I think challenging yourself is a really important aspect of getting better. If you're only playing against players that are worse than you, you're never going to improve.
That's definitely good advice. Playing against players who are better than you, I think, is a huge thing. Uh, I mean, back whenever I first picked up Street Fighter about 6 months ago, and I played it consistently for a couple months, I decided I was going to pick up Balrog because I saw Brian F play it. I took like 2 days to learn his combos, and then I entered in a tournament, and I ended up winning my first match in the tournament. And I was so hype and impressed with myself. It just made me want to play more and more and more. And yeah, the next 2 rounds I got smashed because I was in like bronze and I was playing people in diamond, but still, like, I learned a lot just from those 3 games, and the feeling I got from winning one of them was worth all of the time that I had put in before.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another aspect, right? So in a tournament, when you so in ranked, if you win a match in ranked, you're not necessarily going to play against another player that's like a skill or a tier above you, right? Because you generally will play against people that are around your same skill. And in a tournament, it's similar. But hear me out. If you're newer to a game, in a tournament, every win you take, you're going to be playing against exponentially better players, especially in bigger tournaments, right? So every win you have a higher likelihood of playing against a really, really top player. And if you have never entered a tournament before, you might play against a really top player, your first round, right? So this is a really good way to get better because you can actually even look at your progress, right? You can go back and look at your different tournaments that you played in, especially if it's hosted on like say Challenge or Smash GG. You can go back and look at your placements and see your stats, and you can say, oh, I'm winning this much, I'm not winning this much. I've won this tournament. I came in top 8 here. I came in top 4 here. I came in top 16 here. Who did I play against, right? Because usually top players will enter tournaments, especially prize tournaments, right? So you can really, test your mettle against the best.
All right, I think that's going to wrap it up for today's podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. I definitely appreciate having you here, and your insight was super, super valuable to, I think, not even just the new players, but myself included. I genuinely think I learned a lot from just this 45-minute conversation.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. It was a lot of fun chatting with you. I definitely learned a lot too. I might have to start trying to take notes on my gameplay. Probably help me out. I'm a terrible player. That's why I'm a commentator. I'm a terrible player. So
Just to plug a few things real quick, this podcast is sponsored by the New Challenger Approaching Discord. I will leave a link to that in the description, and I will leave ways to get it, other ways to get to it otherwise on SoundCloud. And I would like to also link our challenge tournament. It's going to be on Fantasy Strike, as we said before. We are both going to be commentating it, and I think it's going to be a great way for new players to get into a game and have some fun, friendly competition in a relatively low stakes way, but it still will provide you with that needed, want to get better. So I will plug that as well. That will also be in the description. And that's been it. I was your host, McGrill.
Yep, and this is Thy Pirate King.
All right, and we'll see you guys next week.